Ma'am, burglary in progress. Drop the tool and put your hands on the vehicle now.
This is my driveway. I'm Judge Evelyn Vance. State your badge number and your probable cause.
I don't care who you say you are, ID or cuffs. Turn around.
You have no lawful basis to seize me. If you touch me, you're committing...
Officer Derek Thorne had patrolling the wealthy enclaves of Northern Virginia for 7 years when he made the split-second decision that would not only end his career, but strip him of his freedom for a decade and a half. He was 32 years old, physically imposing, and possessed an absolute certainty in his own authority that bordered on arrogance. On a bright Tuesday morning in October, amidst the manicured lawns and autumn leaves of Fairfax County, Thorne responded to a burglary call that should have been routine. Instead, he found himself face to face with a woman standing in her own driveway. What happened over the next 20 minutes, the shouting, the disregard for the law, and the violent arrest of a 62-year-old grandmother would result in a $12 million settlement and a federal civil rights prosecution that sent shockwaves through the nation. Before we dive into the details of this case, I want to know where you are watching from today. If you believe in holding power accountable, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us tell the stories that the system often tries to hide. The incident occurred in the rolling hills of McLean, Virginia, a quiet sanctuary for the capital's elite. It is a place of winding driveways, security gates, and silence. It was 10 o'clock a.m. The sun was high and bright, casting long shadows through the oak trees. The air was crisp. Officer Thorne was patrolling just 2 miles away when the dispatch came through. He didn't know that the suspect he was hunting was the Honorable Evelyn Vance, a senior judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. He didn't know that the woman he was about to brutalize had spent 30 years interpreting the very Constitution he was sworn to uphold. He only knew what the dispatcher told him and what his own biases filled in. But ignorance of the law is no excuse for a citizen, and as Derek Thorne was about to learn the hard way, it is certainly no excuse for an officer of the law. Evelyn Vance had spent a lifetime in service to the ideals of justice. At 62 years old, she carried herself with the quiet grace of a woman who had seen the worst of humanity and responded with the best of the law. Born in segregated Richmond and educated at Yale Law School, she had cut her teeth as a federal prosecutor in the 1990s, taking down organized crime syndicates and corrupt politicians with equal fervor. Her reputation was one of ironclad integrity. She was appointed to the federal bench by the president 20 years ago, confirmed unanimously by the Senate. Her clerks called her the Steel Magnolia, polite, soft-spoken, but immovable when it came to the rights of the accused and the limits of government power. That Tuesday morning, Judge Vance was not wearing her black robes. She was not presiding over a courtroom. She was simply Evelyn. She had just returned from the grocery store. She was wearing a comfortable pair of tan gardening slacks, a wide-brimmed sun hat, and an oversized crimson cardigan. She looked like exactly what she was, a grandmother preparing to plant tulip bulbs for the coming spring. She had recently purchased the home, a sprawling colonial estate, to be closer to her grandchildren. The moving boxes were still being broken down in the garage. She had parked her station wagon in the driveway and was carrying a crate of potting soil toward the front porch. She was humming a gospel tune, enjoying the rare solitude of a Tuesday off. She had no idea that her presence in her own front yard was being watched, analyzed, and criminalized by a pair of eyes peeking through the blinds across the street. The eyes belonged to Brett Sterling. Sterling was 38 years old, a day trader who spent most of his time at home monitoring the neighborhood's private social media group. He considered himself the unofficial guardian of the street's property values. He had lived in the neighborhood for 5 years and prided himself on knowing who belonged and who didn't. To Sterling, the wealthy neighborhood was a fortress that needed constant defending from outsiders. When he looked out his window and saw a black woman in older clothes walking back and forth from a station wagon to the porch of the empty house for sale, he didn't know it had sold 3 days prior. His mind immediately jumped to the worst conclusion. He didn't see a new neighbor. He didn't see a gardener. He saw a threat. In Sterling's mind, she was a porch pirate, stealing packages, or perhaps a squatter trying to break into an unoccupied home. He watched her for less than 2 minutes before his bias solidified into fact. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his voice pitching up to sound more alarmed than he actually was. "Dispatch, this is Brett Sterling on Oak Ridge Drive. There's a burglary in progress across the street. A woman is looting the house. She's taking boxes and loading them into a beat-up car. She doesn't live here. You need to send someone before she gets away." He didn't mention that she was moving slowly. He didn't mention the potting soil. He didn't mention that she had a key to the front door. He simply painted a picture of a crime in progress, weaponizing the police against a woman whose only crime was existing in a tax bracket he didn't think she fit. The call was routed to Officer Derek Thorne. Thorne was a man who viewed policing not as a service, but as a hunt. He had joined the force at 25 looking for action, and in 7 years he had built a reputation that was whispered about in the locker room. He had 14 use-of-force complaints in his file. Most involved aggressive takedowns of suspects who were mouthing off or failing to comply quickly enough. His supervisors knew he was a liability. The department's risk management software had flagged him twice, yet the culture of the department protected him. He was seen as a proactive officer, someone who got results, someone who cleared corners. The complaints were dismissed as the cost of doing business in a tough world. When the call came in, burglary in progress, suspect loading loot into a vehicle, Thorne's adrenaline spiked. This was what he lived for, catching a criminal in the act. He didn't turn on his siren. He wanted the element of surprise. He sped toward Oak Ridge Drive, his mind already rehearsing the takedown. He didn't plan to ask questions. He didn't plan to investigate. He planned to neutralize a felon. He arrived at 10:14 a.m., screeching his cruiser to a halt, blocking the driveway of the colonial estate. He saw the station wagon. He saw the black woman standing by the trunk holding a small shovel. He didn't see a federal judge. He saw a suspect, and in that moment, Derek Thorne decided that he was the law, and she was the prey. Thorne slammed his car door and marched up the driveway, his hand already resting on his holster. Judge Vance looked up, startled by the aggressive arrival. She shielded her eyes from the sun, confused but not afraid. She assumed there was an emergency nearby. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked, her voice calm and authoritative. Thorne ignored the question. He stopped 10 feet from her, entering her personal space with aggressive intent. "Drop the weapon. Put it on the ground now." Vance looked at the small hand trowel she was holding for her gardening. "This?" she asked, baffled. "It's a gardening tool. I live here." "I said drop it," Thorne bellowed, his voice echoing off the brick facade of the house. Vance, realizing the officer was unstable, slowly placed the trowel on the pavement and stood up, dusting off her hands. "Officer, I am Judge Evelyn Vance. This is my home. May I ask why you are screaming on my property?" Thorne closed the distance, his face turning red. "I don't care who you say you are. We have reports of a burglary. You match the description. Turn around and put your hands on the vehicle." Vance stood her ground. She knew the law better than anyone in the state. She knew that standing in the curtilage of her own home without a warrant and without reasonable articulable suspicion of a crime, she was under no obligation to be seized. "Officer, you are making a mistake. I have identification inside, but I am not turning around and I am not putting my hands on my car. You have no probable cause. I am asking you to lower your voice and tell me your name and badge number." To Thorne, this wasn't an assertion of rights. It was contempt of cop. It was a challenge to his manhood and his badge. "You're resisting," Thorne spat. "Last chance. ID or cuffs." "I am under no obligation to provide ID to you while standing on my own private property unless you can articulate a crime," Vance said, her voice steady though her heart was pounding. "The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable seizures. You are currently violating it." That was the breaking point. Thorne didn't hear the Constitution. He heard a suspect talking back. "That's it," he growled. The violence that followed was fast and brutal. Thorne lunged at the 62-year-old woman. He grabbed her left arm and twisted it behind her back with enough force to tear the rotator cuff. Vance gasped in pain, her knees buckling, but she did not strike back. "I am not resisting," she shouted clearly for the benefit of any witnesses. "You are hurting me. I am a federal judge." Thorne didn't listen. He swept her legs out from under her, slamming her face first onto the concrete driveway. Her glasses shattered. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow. Two landscapers working on the lawn next door had stopped their mowers. They were watching, horrified. One of them, a man in his 40s, already had his phone out recording the entire interaction. "Hey, she lives there," the landscaper yelled. "She just moved in. What are you doing?" Thorne ignored them. He pressed his knee into the center of Judge Vance's back, pinning her to the ground as he ratcheted the handcuffs onto her wrists. "Stop resisting," he screamed for the camera, despite her lying perfectly still. "Officer," Vance wheezed, the wind knocked out of her. "You have just committed a federal felony. Deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S. Code Section 242. You will go to prison for this." Thorne laughed, a harsh, breathless sound. "Yeah, sure, lady. Tell it to the judge." He yanked her up by the handcuffs, causing her to cry out in pain again. He dragged her toward his patrol car, past her blooming chrysanthemums, past her open front door. He shoved her into the back seat like a sack of garbage, slamming the door on her legs before she could fully pull them in. He walked around to the driver's seat, sweating, convinced he had just apprehended a dangerous criminal who was lying about her identity. He had no idea that the video of the arrest was already being uploaded to the cloud. The drive to the precinct was short, but for Evelyn Vance it was an eternity of humiliation and physical pain. She sat in the cramped plastic seat, her shoulder throbbing with a sharp, sickening heat. She closed her eyes and began to compose her case. She memorized the time. She memorized the route. She memorized the officer's aggressive demeanor. She was no longer just a victim. She was a prosecutor again, building the dossier that would destroy this man. When Thorne marched her into the precinct, he was practically strutting. He dragged her to the booking desk where the watch commander, Sergeant Miller, was sipping coffee. Miller was 55, a veteran who was counting the days to retirement. He looked up, expecting to see a drunk or a shoplifter. Instead, he saw a dignified older woman in gardening clothes, bleeding from the head, handcuffed, with a look of terrifying calm in her eyes. And he recognized her. Sergeant Miller had testified in Judge Vance's courtroom 3 years prior regarding a search warrant application. He knew that face. He knew that voice. His blood ran cold. He stood up so fast, his chair tipped over. "Thorne," Miller whispered, his voice trembling. "What did you do?" "Burglary suspect caught in the act," Thorne bragged. "Refused ID, resisted arrest, claimed she was some kind of judge." Miller ran around the desk, his face pale as a sheet. "Take those cuffs off. Now. Right now." Thorne looked confused. "Sarge, she's a suspect. That is United States Circuit Judge Evelyn Vance," Miller screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "You idiot. You just assaulted a federal judge." The station went silent. Every officer in the booking room stopped what they were doing. Thorne's arrogance evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, sinking pit of dread. He looked at the woman he had thrown to the concrete. She looked back at him, not with anger, but with pity. "Unlock these cuffs, Officer Thorne," Judge Vance said softly. "And then I suggest you call your union representative. You are going to need a very good lawyer." Thorne's hands shook so badly he dropped the key twice before he managed to unlock the mechanism. As soon as her hands were free, Judge Vance didn't rub her wrists. She didn't cry. She asked for a phone. "I need to call the United States Attorney," she said to the sergeant. "And I need a distinct medical evaluation for the injuries caused by your officer." The fallout was immediate, catastrophic, and public. By evening, the landscaper's video was leading every news broadcast in the country. The visual of a white officer slamming a black grandmother to the ground in her own driveway was undeniable. The fact that she was a federal judge turned the incident into a national referendum on police impunity. The wheels of justice, usually slow, moved with terrifying speed when one of their own was the victim. The FBI raided the precinct the next morning to seize body camera footage and personnel files. Derek Thorne was fired within 48 hours, but that was the least of his problems. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division took the lead. This wasn't just a local assault charge. This was a federal case. Brett Sterling, the neighbor who made the call, was not spared. He was charged with filing a false police report and faced a civil lawsuit for defamation and harassment that would eventually bankrupt him. But the hammer fell hardest on Thorne. The trial took place a year later. Thorne's defense team tried to argue qualified immunity, tried to argue that he made an honest mistake in the heat of the moment. But the video lied. The video showed a calm woman and an out-of-control officer. It showed no resistance. It showed pure ego. Judge Vance testified her arm still in a sling from the surgery required to repair her shoulder. She spoke not with vengeance, but with the clarity of the law. She explained exactly how Thorne had violated the Constitution step by step. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Deprivation of rights under color of law resulting in bodily injury. Aggravated assault. The sentencing hearing was where reality truly set in. The federal guidelines were harsh. The judge presiding over the case, a colleague from a neighboring district, looked down at Derek Thorne, who now wore an orange jumpsuit instead of a badge. "Officer Thorne," the judge said, "you were given a gun and a badge to protect the peace. Instead, you used them to wage war on a citizen because of your own bias and arrogance. You did not just break the arm of a woman. You broke the public trust. If you would do this to a federal judge, the court shudders to think what you have done to those with no voice." Thorne was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. There is no parole in the federal system. He would serve at least 85% of that time. At 33, his life as he knew it was over. The city settled Judge Vance's civil rights lawsuit for $12 million, the largest payout in the department's history. The money came from the taxpayers from the very people Thorne was supposed to serve. Judge Vance donated the entire amount to a legal defense fund for victims of police brutality who could not afford representation. Evelyn Vance returned to the bench 6 months later. She still has a slight tremor in her left hand. She still flinches when a car door slams too loudly. But she is still there, a guardian of the law. Derek Thorne sits in a cell of former wolf hunter who became the cautionary tale. This story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. If Evelyn Vance had been a school teacher, a nurse, or a housekeeper, would she have been believed? If there had been no video, would Thorne have written a report claiming she attacked him, and would she be the one in prison today? Justice was served in this case, but only because the victim had the power to enforce it. What do you think creates officers like Derek Thorne? Is it the training, the culture, or the individuals themselves? And should neighbors like Brett Sterling face felony charges for weaponizing the police? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stories like this remind us that freedom is fragile and must be defended every single day. If you found this story important, please like and subscribe. We will see you in the next video.